Good afternoon. Welcome to the Recreational Facility Advisory Board meeting for February the 3rd, 2020. And I would like to remind everyone that our meetings are web streamed. For those in attendance, I'd ask that you ensure your phones are on silence mode. So we begin with the disclosure of pecuniary interest. If none, state no pecuniary interest declared. And we'll start over there with Councillor Taylor.
No. No.
None.
None?
None.
And none here. Thank you. Agenda. Everybody good with the existing agenda, or would you like to add some changes? Anybody going around the table? Councillor Rabbits?
Through you, I think the only thing that may be in order is just having a broad or general discussion on the outcomes from the budget process. We had a number of announcements related to community services and different facilities, and I think it'd be in order for us as a group just to have a general discussion about maybe the fallout from that or next steps.
Good point. Ian, would you like to do the project roadmap update towards the end of the agenda? Would that?
Mr. Chair, there aren't too many updates. I guess the one thing is that I have been waiting for Bill Cridland to provide some update as to what's going to happen between now and when and if the funding becomes available. And he said he was waiting for more specific directions from council. He couldn't give me anything. The only other thing I noted is that in the application, the time frame has changed from ours, which is fine. And the completion date is now scheduled for 2025, if I recall. So there's a 5-year window. It could obviously be finished before then, subject to funding approval, et cetera, et cetera. So that's all I can say for that.
Okay. So we will add the one item then for budget discussion, and we'll do that at the end of the agenda that you see in front of you. So we'll start with the agenda discussion item A, architect project manager update. Is there anybody that can give us an update?
Not probably an update that you're looking for, but there was a discussion at the staff level prior to budget about how we were going to proceed and when with next steps relating to project manager and with such a difficult budget decision that staff had removed funding to go ahead with that and said that we were anticipating hearing in the spring from the application itself, and that they felt most comfortable bringing that forward to council at that time when we knew whether or not we would be nominated. They said, you know, that was their feeling. It was only a couple of extra months, and so it wasn't addressed at budget.
Thank you, Councillor Martin. Anybody else have anything to add to that? Any comments? Okay. So that takes us to B, the application process update. Have we heard anything? Is there any news on that front? Councillor Martin?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. No official news per se, but Mayor Chop and Councillor Taylor and I were at ROMA, the Rural Ontario Municipal Association, at the end of January, and we did not get a meeting with the Ministry of Infrastructure, which was really our last kick at the can to discuss and advocate for our project moving forward. We placed a couple phone calls and unrelated ended up getting a meeting with the Ministry of Infrastructure for water related issues in Port Dover, but we were specifically there for water only and didn't have the chance to talk to them about the community hub. We did kind of barge into a meeting at the end of a day informally and introduce ourselves to the parliamentary assistant and reconnect with Ministry of Infrastructure staff, where we did very quickly plug the hub and leave another application on their desk, but we didn't receive a formal meeting. That being said, we did hear that out of 444 municipalities who are eligible to apply for the funding in this stream, 1,100 applications were received. That's for varying projects, varying dollar values associated with those projects, but they were, needless to say, overwhelmed with the amount of submissions they received.
Thank you for that. Councillor Rabbits?
Thank you, through you. A question that I have, and I don't know what Bill Cridlin would honestly be the best person to ask. He had the heaviest involvement with the application, but I was wondering at what stages the funding is announced. I was under the impression that there was 2 envelopes. Sort of an initial round was in the spring, and worst case scenario, we would be finding out the remainder being announced in the summer of 2020. So I'm wondering, when is that last deadline? We're all very hopeful that we're going to be securing this funding and moving forward with the project, but also in the back of my mind is contingency planning upon not receiving funding. I guess we're going to know by the end of summer 2020 if that is in fact the outcome. And I was, anticipating maybe July, August. It might not be until after our summer recess as council. So that's something that I would be hoping to get some information from staff if Amy doesn't have the information herself, or anyone else at the table that was involved in the application. Because I know that there was a couple windows that we're looking at, and I imagine that maybe some of the larger commitments, or I'm not too sure how they went about that 2-windowed announcement schedule, that a certain percentage was going to be announced, the majority, and maybe those they kept for maybe more debate for that second envelope. But that'd be information that I'd be really interested in finding out. We need to know when the deadline is, or when it's all said and done.
And the best way to find that out?
I think it's going to be upon our staff, and I think Bill Cridlin would have the answer, or at least the windows for those, the benchmarks, about when we could anticipate that. So I think it'd be in order for us to try to have a little bit heavier of a staff complement the next time that we meet at our FAB meeting. Maybe we could put that as an agenda item.
Good, thanks. Okay, that brings us on to the next item, which was inviting presentations from other possible community partners. I put that forward for the agenda last time around, and thought that we had some interesting proposals put forward as we were developing the overall plan through the working group, the requirements for the facilities, that sort of thing. And there are some groups out there that still maintain keen interest in what the status of the community hub, and so I just wonder if we should be putting the invite out to those groups so that we can all hear what they have to say. Maybe have 1, possibly 2 presentations per meeting for the next little while. And of course, there are some other issues brewing with recreational facilities in parts of the county. So those would probably be good groups for us to hear from too. If there's any way that we can help give the county some recommendation on direction for recreational facility use out there, then I think that could become part and parcel of our advisory role. So I don't know what the council thinks of that, but
Thank you, through you. I'll speak to that. I think that it's a good idea to start getting some presentations and start involving more community groups in terms of their needs or their expectations for the hub. It feels like we've lost a little bit of momentum in that we didn't have quorum at our last meeting, and we're sitting in a pretty empty chamber today, but we are also in hurry up and wait mode. we're eagerly awaiting that funding announcement. But in the meantime, there's plenty of work that can be done, including some of the spec and preparation for that positive announcement. But in the meantime, how about we start engaging with some community groups, lining 1 or 2 speakers up, at least would get some bodies in this chamber and start to increase interest in the hub, regardless of the outcome of that funding announcement. We need new recreation facilities in Norfolk County. We're looking at reorganizing some of the community centers that we have to make more with less. And for those groups that are honestly, we're talking about their space and their programming, absolutely we need to start involving them and getting their thoughts and their input on the entire process. So I think it'd improve our ability to get quorum if we start having more presentations. 1 or 2 would be in order, or more. I think that we can fit it into the time that we're taking up to have our deliberations. So I'm not too sure how we want to go about that, so we can equitably ask those different groups, maybe sending out something to our clerk's department to just kind of put an open invitation. This is where your RFAB group is at, and we want to hear from you.
Yeah, I think it would be a good thing to put notice out there. What's the feeling of others in the advisory group? Good with that? Yeah. Okay. Now, do we have to make that in any way, shape, or form, in the form of a recommendation to through council, or get their blessing first?
I would say not, but as a board, definitely I would be putting that in the form of a motion, and if I believe in our terms of reference it needs a seconder and a vote, but this is our business as a group, and I think I would need the buy-in of the people at this table to add that to our agenda.
Or
Would it make some sense to request written submissions to begin with, to see what type of response we get, and then we can adjudicate the best path forward with regards to formal presentations, depending on the number and the nature of those submissions?
does that idea, that process work for everybody? Yeah, okay, sounds good. Councillor Taylor.
And if there's going to be, sifting through applications, if we just increase the scope of this for staff time, do you think we will need a motion there, Kristen, or that? Okay, perfect. So, yeah, sounds like a good way forward.
Okay, so we'll move forward with that then, and that leads us nicely into the requirements working group update and a review of the workshop slides and handout materials. So previously we talked about putting together a bit of a workshop so we could go out and meet with different groups out in the community and do a bit of a slideshow, explain where we are at this time in terms of the old Norfolk Community Center, and also get some information out there so that people aren't going on hearsay. They're actually getting the right information in front of them. And so we have in the agenda package a package of the slides that we had put together, and we had worked with the communications branch division of the county. They've been very good at helping us sort through this. And there's also a fast fact sheet in the package as well. So has anybody or everybody had a chance to review that slideshow? I think we sent it out to all the advisory board members previously, and we also sent it out, I believe, with this agenda package again? Yes. So, Ian.
Just a question through you, Mr. Chairman, to Sue. Is this isn't being updated since we last met, is it?
It has been updated. I think it wasn't saved properly. There are a couple of corrections to put on here. And the corrections being listing on page 4. Looking at it is in the planning, fundraising, athletics, accounting, and we would put in engineering as a background. If we went to page 5, there would be an addition of a walking track that needs to be included here. And as well on page 5, the asterisks would say items for future consideration, just to be very clear, would be future. And on page, it is just a bit of font. Putting on page 9 is just putting a title, proper title.
Councillor Taylor?
Also on page 9, I believe the province nominates in the spring, summer, and then the federal government in the winter.
No,
I think
backwards.
Yeah, I got that backwards there. So that's backwards. Read it about 3 or 4 times. I'm like, is that backwards?
So that can be changed, and I'll resend that out to everyone tonight, just so that we have if there's anything else that people have that they would like included.
Anybody else with suggested changes for the slideshow content? All good. Fast fact sheet, anything there? So go ahead, Sue.
Just along with the fast fact sheet is the proposed amenities. We'd also include the walking track, as that was high on the list and would be part of it. And the other thing is that what we would do is making the website name more visible and easy to reach the website. That's it.
All right, so we're good. And so the idea was, as I said, was to take this information out, meet with different groups around the county, and as required. And so if we have invites from any groups, we could go out and take this information to them. Sue?
Just a thought that I have is that there is, in February, I know in the past there's been a registration blitz with spring and summer teams. That might be an idea that it's on a Saturday at the rec center usually. If we could be there to answer questions, it would be one way that we could get information out about our group.
Okay, done with that item. Discussion regarding possibility of an energy subgroup. So I just brought this forward as part of the requirements working group update. There are a few people out there in the community with energy expertise, and as this project moves along, I think that'll be one of the big facets that we'll need to work on and start to look at developing specs around any of those possibilities, geothermal, heating, solar, installations, lighting, controls, all the neat little mechanical things that we can do to, get as many synergies out of the facility infrastructure as we can. And so I was just wondering, is there an interest, is there an appetite, do you think, for us to form some sort of energy subgroup? Can we do that as part of the advisory board? I'm not sure what the ramifications are as for a board like this to do something like that. Councillor Taylor.
I think a subgroup of the committee would, like we've done with subgroups made up of ourselves, would just come present when things are made. So I think it could be fully within. I'm looking over just.
Yeah, bringing other people into as resources, the subject matter expertise, that sort of thing. Yeah. Yeah. Councillor Martin?
Yeah, Sue just nailed it. I would suggest that you just extend an invitation for them to present to RFAB or call one of the particular RFAB meetings and use it as a working group for energy and have a presentation lined up. That's how I would go about that.
can do. And the other thing I was, thinking if that was to come into being, have a group that works specifically on energy aspects of the facility, to bring, of course, Michael Samos to the table, who is the county's expert on all things energy, especially when it comes to facilities. So, yeah. The county has an energy committee, yeah, which I serve on. And so could it be a subgroup of that, I wonder? Yeah. We do have an energy committee meeting coming up within the next few weeks, so I can add that to the agenda. We'll come at it from two directions. Councillor Taylor.
Yeah, I was just about to suggest, why don't you see if you can add a presentation to that committee from the requirements working group, just to let them know what you're seeking, and see if then with your other hat on, you might be able to push some stuff from the other end with that committee, and might work out well.
Yeah, I think that we can arrange some sort of marriage of the two sort of thing, so, yeah. Purposing of existing facilities. And Councillor Taylor.
I think it might actually make a lot of sense to talk about repurposing after we talk about some budget outcomes, just so we can update everyone with some things going on with, yeah, just budget outcomes. Would that be okay with everyone, or?
If that's okay with everyone, we'll make that little switch in the agenda. Yeah. And so that brings us to budget discussion. Councillor Rabbits.
Thank you. Through you, if I can lead us off. Council made a number of tough decisions regarding facilities, community centers, and halls, recreation leisure facilities in Norfolk County, and I think I'm just going to go through our list here. We had a total of 25 different recommendations from staff that ranged in their impact to community services, many resulting in service level reductions, some of which was discussed in closed session, because it did affect identifiable individuals and people's jobs at the end of the day is what we are talking about. And I think I'll just run through those that I feel likely will have the largest impact to this body, and will likely inform our conversation on repurposing existing facilities. So going on down the list here, an item that we disclosed in closed session was hockey arena consolidation. An outcome of that conversation was the removal of the ice in the Recreation Center and Lisa Carr Center. Rink side, we lost our summer ice, and we are moving it to Waterford in order to accommodate Simcoe seniors. So the Simcoe seniors will be moving in due course out of the Pond Street location through some consultation. There are other user groups in the Pond Street building that weren't explicitly stated during budget deliberations, but it's very hard to summarize a 3-hour-long conversation in 15 minutes when we came out and passed things in open. But believe me, the Potters, the Scouts, young theater players were all considered and will be consulted in order to find those user groups some new space, whether that be in the Simcoe Rec Center or elsewhere in the county, or possibly in time in the new community, all Norfolk Community Center. So that's where I think I'd like to start the conversation about budget impacts. Ultimately, we lost a sheet of ice, and we found a new home temporarily for our Simcoe seniors. So that will solve one problem with the Pond Street building, mold in the basement, asbestos in the ceiling, total lack of accessibility. It's a real shame that we have our Simcoe seniors in that facility, and it sounded like, from what I read in the newspaper and from speaking with some individuals, that they're very receptive to the move, whether it be on a temporary basis or in permanency, depending on announcements from our hub funding. So that was the immediate impact. With hockey arena consolidation, we also faced potentially closing another rink. We looked at usages, we looked at cost to run these different facilities. I believe that the Langton Arena was one that was sort of highlighted as the potential arena that possibly could have a community group run the arena. The idea was if we can't find a community group to run the arena, that it would be either put up for sale as a private group could run it, or potentially sold off, and those groups moved to Delhi or other places to play hockey. In the municipality, we've got a great group out there in Langton, the Langton Royals, that are very green in their operation. They've just had their first season, but we were looking at groups like professional hockey that could potentially take on the challenge of running an arena. They could be subsidized to the tune of $150,000 to hire an arena manager, hire a rink rat, actually make a go of it. But this is all through consultation, and nothing is ironed out yet. We've sort of bought ourselves a year to talk about how we could possibly have one of our arenas run by another party. The Langton Arena was a topic of conversation, but it could potentially be another arena. We decided that the most equitable thing to do as a group was to put out this request for interest for running all of the arenas in Norfolk County. And potentially, if we had another strong group that found themselves in a position to operate the arenas, potentially, we would be looking at that as a possible solution. Basically, the county is in a losing position financially to be running all of the rinks that we currently have. And regardless if the hub is approved or not, we are looking at consolidating our hockey arenas as a result of our last budget conversation. So before going on to maybe some of the other impacts, I think I'd like to open it up to the table here. This is in our bailiwick. We are the Recreation Facilities Advisory Board. I'd be interested if there's any other insights, or if councillors that are present here heard something else than I did. Ultimately, it was a staff's recommendation, and it was endorsed unanimously by council to pursue. But we haven't found out where the chips fell, and we haven't gone through the public consultation process to see what interest, if any, are out there in the community to run our arenas.
Comments?
I guess just as a very initial comment, given the process that we're undertaking with regards to considerations towards the hub, and of course ice pads being a key component of that, as well as the senior center, I'm surprised and a bit disappointed that there wasn't a conversation that came to this committee before such decisions were made, for our input and consideration of the factors and how they might relate to the facilities as they are, and how that might also relate to rolling into a successful hub application. So I'll just let that comment stand first. I'm surprised by that.
It was a little bit of a blindsider, but also some of these things are just kind of starting to come to light, as far as I understand from what I read anyways. With, budget deliberations, there was a lot of things that kind of blindsided council too, right? Councilor Rabbits.
If I may, I'll echo that sentiment. We found out basically when the public did, and there's certain information we weren't able to disclose, having had that conversation in closed session. But I also felt blindsided by the staff's recommendations to right size as the budget as it's been coined. So unfortunately now we're behind the 8 ball, and now is public consultation mode after the decision has been made. So I can appreciate the comments from my fellow board member here that there was a lack of consultation with this body in regards to that. Now we're in catch-up mode, or now we're in reaction mode. I feel that with the loss of the ice in Simcoe, it was sort of a good faith gesture on the part of Simcoe, knowing that we could potentially have a new recreation facility being built in this ward. But we wanted to get away from the wardism in my community versus another one, or a tit for tat. But having said that, at the end of the day, Simcoe did lose a sheet of ice and is looking at building a new facility ultimately, I believe that 2 twin pads will be built in Simcoe. Right now, it's really dependent on the outcome of that funding for the hub, whether we're, and that's going to lead to our next conversation, we're renovating an existing facility or we're building new. I think there's a very strong argument for building new as opposed to repurposing old. And I feel that that sentiment is agreed upon at council, but it is very contingent on that provincial and federal level of funding to build new. Without that, we are looking at making more of less and refurbishing an existing facility with the sheet of ice gone at the rec center. That really just leaves Talbot for potential renovation. Having said that, the other large announcement that was made, and was another blindside is a good terminology or a good term of phrase to coin it, the Delhi Kinsman Pool closure. So that was postponed for a year as a result of our conversation. I imagine, like with the other community centers, halls, arenas, and now pools, we'll be looking for a community group to potentially take up the reins of running that facility. We could stomach the operating for another year. We're looking at about $2 million, close to it, to maintain the pool there in Delhi. So that can's been kicked down the road for a year. We have a plan for paying for the operating for another season. We do not have a plan in place for maintaining the capital going forward into 2021. And I don't know where the conversation's going to go, but we have certainly drummed up a lot of interest in the community in terms of keeping that pool alive and looking at how we're going to pay for it as a community. So that was another one that came out of the budget discussions, was hockey rinks and pools. And I don't want to necessarily turn away from this conversation about hockey. We're talking about figure skating. We're talking about a lot of different uses for ice. But there's also the pools that are involved in this conversation, and it would appear that staff's recommendation was the Delhi one is the one that is cost-benefit analysis costing the most and benefiting Norfolk County the least. That's how the information was presented to us in council, and that's how we made our decision.
Thank you. Anybody else? Sue, you had your hand up.
Just one question, point of clarification of the Delhi pool. What is the capital cost that would have to go into it?
I wish I had the subject matter expertise to answer that articulately. We're looking at maintaining the quality of the water itself, I believe chlorination, and we're looking at the filtration system. We have issues with our other pool in Simcoe that's really regarding air, poor air quality, and the ability to keep that place oxygenated. It is a much larger pool. It is open air out in Delhi, so we don't have that same concern with the air quality. It is dealing with chlorination, the pool, the filtration system itself. But I don't have the subject matter expertise to tell you why it costs $2 million to keep that pool open. I wish I had foundations. So if we had more staff here with community services, they'd be able to give you a direct answer to that question. I'm hoping that at our next RFAT meeting, we've got a little bit more bench strength there. Of course, our staff are scrambling to action many of the decisions that were made at budget, and that's likely why we don't have a full complement here today.
Ian.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Just, I guess, in reference to moving ahead and looking at this in terms of the facilities and whatnot, I think you have to go back a bit, at least from our perspective, not the councilors, because you've likely got the information where we don't. It would be interesting. I mean, I went through your budget online to the extent that I was able to and understand it, but there's a lot of material that isn't shown in there. For example, I know you've got an issue. I don't know if that same issue will be is it projected to next year, and you don't even want to discuss that right now, I suppose. But I guess in terms of revenue sources, are we as a group able to get a copy of all your potential revenue sources, existing and proposed? Because you had land, 100 acres plus for sale. There's obviously a potential value there. I mean, you need all of that information to know what your offsetting options are in terms of moving forward on dealing with some of the items you just referred to, Ian. And I guess the other thing, and I wasn't quite sure what you said about the, I just got to remember what it was now. Oh, the Langdon Arena, for example, and the options potentially getting locals involved in that. Are you implying the locals get involved to the extent of funding it?
In response, we were looking for a community group to take on operations of the arena. The model as presented to me was basically you sell it to them for $1, they take ownership of it and stewardship, and they are responsible for operating the arena.
So the question that I raised there, does that potentially create a two-tier system where you have all the other arenas supported by the general public, and that would not be the case? And I don't need to debate it. I'm just picking off points in your discussion. But I guess the other thing was, although your budget's online, it would be very nice to have a hard copy of the material, including revenue source and all that, for this group to look at in more detail, and then perhaps be in a better position to make suggestions and so forth.
I think that's an order, Ian, and I believe that staff could make that information available to you and to our board here. Hopefully we can come prepared to review that information and talk about user fees, talk about expenses over revenues, and have a more informed discussion next time we sit down at this table. I believe that information could be made available to you. With regards of sale of land, I did want to have a point of clarification because you don't have all the information before you, and I appreciate that. 143 acres roughly of vacant lot, woodland. These were areas that were not in use. It was land that would be declared surplus, but these are lands that we don't currently have facilities on that are operating. These are, in the true sense of the word, surplus lands that are vacant that could be put into active or productive use. They're out of productive use right now. They're just sitting there. Was the 143 acres that was discussed. Also wanted to comment on the idea of having a two-tier system. Yeah, we're looking at a board of management potentially to take over the operations of arenas while the other ones would continue to be county run.
Councillor Martin?
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to follow up on that, a couple of the comments as well. The revenue sources, so that information came to council in closed session to make a decision on. We decided to direct staff to bring that information back to council. I can't foresee a whole lot of reasons as to why that would remain in closed session. They would be zoned and we would have a discussion on should we sell them and what would they be sold as and for. So I think that information, as our staff reports come back, we can try to be very open and transparent about the revenue from that. The other thing I wanted to comment on, Councillor Rabbits did mention that the county would subsidize. So the figure that was firstly, all arenas will go out into an RFP process. He did mention that, but we've been talking about Langton quite a bit here, and I don't want someone to hang their hat on that. Any arena in Norfolk County will go out and be a part of an RFP process looking for management of it. Norfolk County will subsidize it at a figure that we discussed of $150,000. So that is less than what it's costing us to operate now, but not by much. We would then, have that money go towards a staff member to run it or operate it. This is a model that's used in a lot of other municipalities, and Norfolk County might get a seat at the table with that operator to say, hey, could you please keep your hockey fees in line with this percentage, but charge whatever you see fit for that as an option. And I just wanted to additionally comment that I very loudly, proudly, and boldly for many years stated that this community hub would not result in closures of other arenas, and that is not the case. And so I kind of sit here with my foot in my mouth. However, we didn't know the information that we now know, and I hate to say it, but I think it further demonstrates the lack of sustainability in the way that we're operating right now. And it is very unfortunate, and we need to be very cautious and need to include the rest of this community in our discussions in each and every step. But it is further demonstrating the lack of sustainability, the way that we're operating in these siloed, isolated facilities. So it pains me, just I'm sure all of council very deeply, but especially me, because it's not what I've ever advocated for. But we have to make these changes, and I would echo Councillor Rabbitt's comments that it came to council very, very short notice to make the decisions. Thanks.
If Sue first and then Gord.
I understand that it's tough to make those decisions, and with the information that was given, I also would like to think as an advisory person that we have facilities and we have operations that are happening in our Norfolk County that can be consolidated for some, and that are hobbies and that are being run at more cost to the Norfolk County, and we need to be more efficient. And I do think that the hub bringing everybody together is an answer to make efficiencies. But I just want to reiterate, those are hard decisions to make, for sure. And I see that we should not, as Norfolk County, be funding somebody's hobby or where people are making money from certain aspects. Like, I'm thinking there's different groups out there that we have to look at all aspects, not just one county, and I mean not one ward, for sure. Thank you.
Gordon?
Just an additional note of concern, if it did come that last minute, that in itself is concerning to hear that. To then double down and have something come so last minute, but then so quickly result in dramatic decisions is also quite concerning, because I understand that there's no consultation with this board, which is set up to review items exactly like this and provide feedback. Additionally, I've heard of no community user group being consulted on any of these changes. And so to understand the programming implications to these changes, I don't understand how that's possible in A, such short order, and secondly, without any public consultation whatsoever, which leaves me very concerned with regards to the ramifications of these and what was understood or not understood in terms of those consequences by council in making these decisions. It's very concerning. And additionally, when we are putting together a proposal for a hub that calls for 2 ice surfaces in Simcoe, we were also doing trade-offs, talking about gymnasiums versus second pad, etc. Not once was a concern raised that our utilization rates were not high enough to justify a second pad. So how do we go through all of these months so confident that a second pad was needed? From my experience sitting with minor hockey, etc., I'm very confident a second pad is needed based on what I see. But not once did staff express any level of concern that a second pad isn't needed. And then at budget time, we are quite comfortable eliminating a second pad in Simcoe. How is that possible? Beyond that, Councillor Martin's also raising her concerns that she had expressed confidence that we wouldn't be closing any rinks in Norfolk as a consequence of this. But if we only need one in Simcoe, which is now what we're saying, then when we build 2, are we not closing one somewhere else? Are we not being entirely inconsistent in the messaging to those outside of Simcoe that building a second pad in Simcoe will not threaten their arena? I don't see the consistency. I see no consultation. I see no raising of concern before this budget time that we didn't need the arenas. And I do see it threatening facilities outside of Simcoe should the hub come to fruition, which is exactly what we said was not going to be the case. And I have a problem with that. I also don't like hearing the message that we're going to subsidize a private interest group $150,000 to run an arena when it costs us just over that to have it being served in accordance with the public good. Will there be public skating? Maybe not if it's not profitable. There's a community interest in these facilities, whether it's rinks or pools or senior centers, etc., that have to be weighed. And I don't hear dramatic cost savings if we're going to be subsidizing. And all I've heard is consultations between Norfolk County and one private group, a for-profit hockey enterprise, that have been ongoing with regards to one arena, when no other not-for-profit hockey association has been approached with regards to these changes and these opportunities. That's offensive. I'll stop.
Okay, I have Councillor Martin first, and then Sue.
Thank you. I wonder if, I don't want to put my foot in my mouth here and comment on something that was shared with council in closed session, but I'm wondering if there needs to be some type of recommendation for our FAB to come in, again, to go into closed session and have information shared, because I can see that there's a level of frustration here, and I think that communication is in order, certainly. I did just want to comment that I don't think that again, without saying too much, I don't think that our decision was focused on utilization. And I would say that our argument for 2 arenas in Simcoe still stands. And I know that from someone who doesn't have the information, from the public sitting at home, I can understand everything you're saying. But it's not, it wasn't about numbers of utilization and who was using it. And I feel very confident in putting forward our application with 2 arenas in it. And then further with the inefficiencies, we've talked so much about the efficiencies we're going to find when we further consolidate. I don't want that to be forgotten if anyone's listening at home. By bringing these 2 rinks under one roof is different than running 2 separate facilities in downtown Simcoe. And then to the comment of community interest, I just wanted to clarify that this council and staff have not went out and had conversations with community groups. It was just an example tossed around. And I agree with you that that would be alarming and that there should be community consultation at large, but that has not happened yet. But I wonder if we should put some type of, I don't even know if it's required, a formal motion, but I think maybe that we need to get on the same page here and share information with this board in closed session, bring everyone up to speed with what this council knows, or receive clarification from staff at this point in time about what information is very open, and do it all in open session for that matter, and get on the same page.
We need that in the form of a motion. Councillor Rabbits.
Well, I'm listening to Board Member Gord Melo's comments, and I'm taking them to heart. He's right. I think we need community services to do a presentation to our FAB. And I think based on our conversation, it may be in order for us to make a recommendation to take back to council. I don't see us moving the needle in a positive direction in any other way. Much of the conversation is somewhat nuanced and technical in terms of ice usage, revenues, user groups, whether they are or not being consulted. I believe that's what Bill Critland's doing as we speak. But ultimately, we're responsible as policymakers, as your community council, and our staff are responsible as subject matter expertise in these areas. And I don't have all of the answers. I know how we got here. I believe I have a vision of where we're going, but I'm hearing you loud and clear about the inconsistency in the messaging. And at this juncture in time, that's what I'm worried about. We've got an application out, as you said. We need to have our General Manager of Community Services here to answer these questions, to assist us in our debate. I'm hoping that can happen at our next meeting.
Yeah, I certainly hope so. Gord?
Oh, go ahead, sorry.
I was going to say, I listened to the discussion around the table about the issues that came forward through the last budget process, and look at it any way you want, but it seems to me that it's just all the more reason to develop plans and build recreational facilities that are sustainable, that serve all the community needs as much as possible, and drive efficiencies. And also, I'd say all the more reason to hear from those other possible community partners, those user groups that are out there. Start bringing them to this table, start hearing their deputations, their presentations. And it's obviously some hard work to do, both on the part of council and I would say too on the part of this RFAP group. And hopefully that results in good solutions for all of Norfolk going forward. Anybody else have anything? Gordon?
Just a couple questions with regards to the senior center, but really just two. Was a cost estimate for transferring the senior center to the rec center mentioned? That's number one. Go ahead.
Councillor Martin.
What I can share is that there will be $100,000 spent on retrofitting a move. And the other thing I can share is that the sale of the Pond Street building is being discussed as an as-is sale.
Follow-up question to that is, given that we're hoping to hear the provincial announcements on funding within a month or 2 months, whatever the case may be, would that senior center move be contingent on not receiving funding, or is that a direction that we would be spending that money and moving the senior center even if we were building a new senior center within a couple years?
Thanks, Mr. Chair. The ice will stay in the Simcoe Rec Center until June, and then whatever needed to be done at that point in time to retrofit would occur. So the seniors, I can't imagine, would be moving prior to August. So at that point in time, hopefully we would have more information, but I believe the retrofitting is ensuring things like, the details aren't specified yet, but the ramp, moving some kitchenette supplies over, things like that, just some basic run-of-the-mill stuff. But outside of that, I can't comment. I'm not sure.
Anybody with anything further to add?
I apologize, but I need to skedaddle, but I will be happy to relay messages from today to staff.
Great, thank you. Anything else? Anybody else? Ian?
Just thinking about what's being discussed around the table in terms of going forward. Obviously, the budget's been set. So a lot has to be done before this time next year when you deal with your next budget. It would seem to me, and perhaps this is what staff is and councilors are already thinking about, that you have a detailed outline of what you want to accomplish in respect of all of these things we discussed between now and when you make the decision next year. And we won't have this business of last minute trying to do something. So that everybody can get involved, what Gord has talked about and others, and in fact have a time frame, much like we got for the hub, for all of these things, and shake it out, because I'm sure there are better solutions, but certainly giving it 12 months, or whatever time it does take during that next period, to deal with it so that you do not have this situation next year. And hopefully we as a board can help to some extent in that.
I couldn't agree more. I'm sure there are some creative solutions out there, some good solutions that work for everybody. And if we can help to drive out those solutions for council, make recommendations up to council, I think that's what we're here for, isn't it? And so, hopefully, we can serve council in much more ways than just the all Norfolk Community Center. I mean, that's all part and parcel, but there's other solutions that obviously need to be driven out as well. Councilor Rabbits.
Well, with that, I'm not too sure if we've made it on to bullet point E or F and repurposing of existing facilities. But with that in mind, I believe it's within this board's mandate to look at what we're going to do with our existing facilities. We're assuming that we're going to be successful in our hub application. But with all due respect, if we are not, and I'm not saying that we will not be, we do need to start looking at what we're going to be doing regardless of the outcome with these buildings. We're talking about the Pond Street building, we're talking about Talbot Gardens, we're talking about the Annalisa Carr Center Recreation Center here in Simcoe. So I think those three buildings are on our radar, they're on our agenda. We need to start planning in the months to come leading into the last funding announcement this summer, what our plans are, what our recommendations are to council for how to repurpose these buildings. We've had direction from council that we're looking at selling the Pond Street building. Perhaps there is a way for us to help contribute to that dialogue, offer up an alternative, or support council's recommendation to sell that particular building. Having said that, I haven't heard much planning on what to do with Talbot Gardens, whether the hub is a go or we are in contingency planning mode. And I would say the same is true for the Annalisa Carr and the Rec Center. We know now that council's direction is to put our seniors into the ice surface after this summer. And that's about as much information as I think this group is going to have to go on. But having said that, we're an advisory board at the end of the day to council, and we need to provide them with our best recommendations, and this is something that we should actively start planning on. What we think our best recommendation is to repurpose these buildings, or what to do in terms of disposing ourselves of these assets. Ultimately, if there was a sale to take place, it would go into the tangible capital assets reserve, and we would have some funding for future capital needs in Norfolk County in terms of our community centers. So that's what's going to happen if we were to sell the properties. We would have some money in a pot for future capital expenses. We need to start thinking as a group what those capital expenses may be and how we're going to be utilizing those resources moving forward into 2021.
Anything further? Ian?
Maybe I should shut up. In response to Councillor's comments, again, as I said earlier, as a committee dealing strictly with the facilities, you might find that you got your arm tied behind your back. You really need more information relative to other things other than just the recreational facilities, because it has an impact. Your funding sources, your revenues, all of that sort of thing. You got to look at the big picture to get a better focus on what we're doing with regards to the buildings. And I'm just saying, well, if we're able to get that information, whatever happens as we pursue this, that would be very helpful.
Okay. Councilor Rabbits.
I'm not satisfied that we've given direction or made a request to actually start advancing these discussions in our next meeting. I've been sitting here saying I'm hoping that Bill Cridlin will present to us. I'm hoping that the discussion will be had, but I haven't actually had any formal recommendation made from anyone at the table or myself, and I'm thinking that may be in order. I'd like to get a little bit of stronger bench strength for our next meeting. Hopefully we'll have more bodies in terms of quorum. But if that's the information you're seeking, with respect, Mr. Neville, I think that's a motion that I would be willing to advance so that we can have this discussion next time around.
Okay, can we have that?
Through you to Mr. Chairman, again, that's well and good. But again, it would be helpful if we could get some of that information in writing before the meeting so that we can go through it, because the meeting is so short, we can't assimilate some of that stuff even whether it's verbal or not, but if it's already in hard copy, those comments, it's much easier, from my perspective anyway, to talk more forcefully about it.
I'm okay with that. We've all signed affidavits for closed session items, and you've been included in information that is privileged, and I don't see this being out of order with what's already transpired on this board. Or staff member feel that's sufficient direction to get some numbers before this group, or?
Well, the proposed budget is online, and I understand that you want something printed, and I can certainly print the budget for you. I know that the budget department will be currently working on the final copy, so I don't know if you want to wait until then, because there has been changes. I don't believe there is actually a copy right now that is available that has all the changes. It's just been a week, but if you want to wait for the final, or I can print the proposed, or...
When was the final expected then?
I don't know, probably, I don't want to speak for the department, but probably a couple weeks.
Personally, I'd rather wait to see what the changes are, and then we're dealing with whatever the facts are
Right.
as approved.
And then I just have this motion here, if this is the line that you're headed down, that council consider meeting with the RFAB to discuss the information shared in the budget meeting closed session and to consult with RFAB on decisions and next steps regarding our facilities and moving forward.
Nailed it.
Gordon?
Just to clarify, because we were talking about two different things, I believe. One is the capital facilities, buying, selling, repurposing, et cetera. The second is the conversation we had earlier with regards to the operational changes that were made.
I thought the printed copy was the levy supported that we just did last week, but you're talking about the capital that was done like
everything, actually.
in
Yeah.
December?
Yeah, don't silo it. We need both.
Okay, I'm fairly certain that the capital is done. It went to council in December, but the proposed one would not be complete at this point.
Can we hear that motion one more time, please?
That council consider meeting with RFAB to discuss the information shared in the budget meeting closed session and to consult with RFAB on decisions and next steps regarding our facilities and moving forward. So basically that was kind of capturing what you were talking about in closed session. And recreational facilities, sure.
Councilor Ravitz?
And if it assists, if that information needs to be obtained in confidence or presented in closed session of RFAB, I think that should be included in the motion, just in case we do have to go behind those closed doors yet again. If that's going to get the information before you, that's really what I'm concerned about. That's the intent of me moving this motion, so you have the information you need and that you've requested.
So with this motion, it really is to stimulate some conversations when you guys are passing it at council. This won't probably be the motion that council would pass. They would formulate their own wording, whether they wanted to release information in open session or if they want to have a conversation in closed session with our FAB alone. It's basically just to simulate your conversation regarding it.
Okay, so we have a motion, we have a mover. Councilor Ravitz, seconder. Gordon? Okay, any further discussion? If not, all those in favor? That is carried. Thank you. Anything further going around the table? Anything? Anybody have anything further? Okay. Can I have a mover and seconder to adjourn today's meeting? Okay, moved by Ian, second by Sue. All in favor? And that's carried. Thanks.